Mexico City itself is concerned, no members have been harmed and no one seriously injured. So that's wonderful news, isn't it? So the beginning certainly is to think about the sufferings of our own immediate environment, isn't it? And this is what we should really encourage everyone to do. So Mark Parker, in the Young Men's Course, produced, when he gave an experience, this great sheet of paper that stretched from up there to the bottom of the stage, and there was writing, many, many lines of writing. And he said, I just sat down an hour ago and I wrote down all the people I know in my environment. And the sheet stretched from the top there to the bottom. How many names were on it, Mark? About 200 or 300 names. Incredible, isn't it? Anyway, Mark, I hope you're embracing that long sheet of paper. Good. Anyway, of course, this is how, isn't it, Ankoku is achieved. Only through taking responsibility for the people in our environment. Through that, Ankoku, securing peace in the land, is achieved. So for each person, they have a place of work usually, they have their family, and they have their neighborhood or community. That is their area. Maybe like Mark, they've all got 250 names that they could write, people who they run into every day or every week. But as leaders, as chapter chiefs, or headquarters chiefs, we have to go beyond that. We have to embrace in our action, as I said, our town, our city, the whole county, the whole area of England, if you like, and the whole world. Gradually embracing or expanding our lives so that we can embrace more and more and more. And it all begins in front of the Gahonzon. It's not difficult. It's just remembering to do it, isn't it? If you're responsible for a borough, that borough is there. You're looking down on it as if you were somewhere in the universe, looking down at the earth. And there is the borough of Richmond and Kingston. There. Down there, not up here somewhere, or here. It's there. That's the way to look at it. You embrace it that way because you're embracing it with the law of the universe. So your perspective should be from the universe. You understand? So Sensei said once, I remember, we must get used to viewing the earth from the universe and not viewing the universe from the earth. This is the way we should look at it. And this, of course, is why he gave that guidance, which is already famous, about the drop of ink, isn't it? Through expanding our lives to embrace Kosen-rufu in the whole of our borough or the whole of our county, we're also expanding our lives so that when we drop that problem into it, instead of being like a little tiny teacup, that the drop of ink colours all the water, we drop our problem into it and it's absorbed, it disappears. You're looking down at that problem from the universe. Maybe you have a difficult member in your chapter. Don't put him or her up here as if it's like, some great totem. You can embrace that person's life if you have the right perspective. I don't mean looking down in a derogatory way. I mean looking down from the aspect of the mystic law and embracing that person in the great ocean of your life. This is one that Sensei was teaching in this guidance. And there is another aspect too of the importance of feeling the sufferings of people. And that is that unless we can feel the sufferings of the people who surround us, we cannot shape the future, can we? How can we know what sort of a future we want unless we understand the sufferings of the people now? We know what our suffering is, but do we know what the suffering, of the people in that factory is, or in that hospital, or wherever? So we have to become aware and embrace these people in our action, in everyone, because then in a very natural way, because of that connection that we've established, we begin, through feeling their sufferings, to develop vision concerning what sort of life they should have in the future. You understand? And you can't do that unless you can feel their sufferings now. So it involves a total expansion of one's life, doesn't it? I just asked John to read a guidance from Sensei, which I think is appropriate to what I've been saying up to now.
In propagating true Buddhism far and wide, it is inevitable that the 3 obstacles and 4 devils will appear, even though they may differ in their intensity, as is mentioned in the writings of Nichiren Daishonin. Moreover, it is true that in an organization where ordinary people like us are gathered, there may be negative feelings, egocentric views, and other problems. But what matters most is our essential attitude, which enables us, believers throughout the world, to maintain our faith in unity by following the correct practice and guidance. Our members should become true friends with one another, maintaining a strict attitude in faith so that they can walk along the correct path of faith throughout their lives. The leaders in each country must remember this essential guideline, which is the correct attitude toward faith. I am fully aware of the many hardships which leaders must face, but from the standpoint of 50, 100, or 500 years from now, you are at the starting point as pioneers, entrusted with a great mission, and so I strongly urge you to have the correct awareness of faith and feel profound responsibility for giving your members correct guidance on faith while braving these hardships. When the friends of the mystic law throughout the world practice correct faith based on the Daiga Honzon which exists at the head temple Taisekoji and advance further on good terms with one another, they can secure the peace of the land through the propagation of true Buddhism, RISSHO ANKOKU, in their respective countries, and furthermore contribute towards securing the peace of the entire world. Even though the membership in each country is relatively small, prayers based on the mystic law are boundless and immeasurable. Therefore, when you believe deeply in this principle and pursue the great path of the mystic law without deviation, you will be able to enjoy limitless and inexhaustible benefits.
Thank you. So you can see too what Sensei is saying there, that if we broaden our lives and expand them, also it means that our guidance to members will have depth, that we can help and encourage members also to establish a vision for the future, to establish feeling for sufferings of those around them through that guidance. But first, of course, like everything else, we have to do it ourselves. So in the last few lines of this question, the guest ends by saying, "You speak of the gods and sages taking leave, and of disasters and calamities arising side by side. Upon what sutras do you base your views? Could you describe for me the passages of proof?" So as you know, in the first passage and the last passage which we studied on summer course, very briefly, Nichiren Daishonin explains the fact that unless we feed the Shoten Zenjin, the Buddhist gods, with life force, through having strong, positive direction in our lives, then inevitably our lives becoming passive and apathetic will lead to those Buddhist gods becoming ineffective in carrying out their role of protection. And this is why the 3 calamities and 7 disasters occur. So just to take that a little further in the last few minutes of this talk, the three calamities, which are on the paper behind me. Inflation. We all know inflation, what it means in the West. In less developed countries, particularly important, is escalating grain prices, which is the basic fundamental diet. Secondly, war. Thirdly, pestilence. Those three calamities arise from the three poisons which run rampant in human beings' lives if they have insufficient life force, isn't it? Insufficient positive purpose and direction. And of course it's a vicious spiral. One calamity occurs, and unless those people have got something to hold on to, they become depressed or frightened, and their life force will become even lower. So inflation, high grain prices, arises from greed. War arises from anger. Pestilence arises from ignorance and stupidity. Not being able to, being so bemused by probably the other two calamities that no proper steps are taken to guard against pestilence. So you can see that these three calamities are like huge happenings, phenomena. Whereas the seven disasters analyze the sufferings that occur to human beings through the happenings, through the three calamities. So there is a difference between the nature of a calamity and the nature of a disaster as described in Buddhism. The calamity is the happening itself. The disaster is the suffering to human beings that arises from it. So the disasters, I no need to go through them again. They're up here behind me. But these analyze the various sorts of suffering that arise directly from the calamity. So you can see, therefore, that everything comes down into the end to just the three calamities, doesn't it? It's the three calamities that spark off all the rest of the sufferings. And it's also important to see that those three calamities affect every single aspect of life. That is to say, they affect the three realms of life. In the case of the land, it's very obvious. Inflation, high grain prices is directly connected with the land and directly connected with the people's ability to provide themselves with the treasures of life. That is to say, food, shelter, and accommodation. These are affected by that first calamity. And the second calamity, war, is the most terrible calamity from the point of view of society, the realm of society, isn't it? That is to say, society, strictly speaking, is based on harmony between human beings, or it should be, between human beings and nature. This harmony is destroyed through war. And so far as the realm of the self is concerned, pestilence deeply affects it. If we're not well, if we're unhealthy, we don't function properly, spiritually or physically, do we? And in terms of Buddhist teachings, the 5 components of the realm of the self, that is to say, form, perception, conception, volition, and consciousness, are all out of balance. They're not working properly. Therefore, we suffer deeply, both physically and spiritually. So, in that sense, the 3 calamities are, in fact, the outward expression, if you like, of the darkness in human life. That is the outward manifestation of it. And out of those 3 calamities, which way is it? Yeah. Out of those 3 calamities, the sufferings of the 7 disasters arise, one after another, because one can trigger off another, can't it? You get a country that has a weak economy. For greed or for one or other reason, other countries may attack it. And through war, everything collapses. Economically, the social order collapses, and pestilence and disease usually creates further havoc. So one is triggering the other off. So the more, therefore, we establish RISSHO, the ultimate truth, and the more people we can find who are waiting for the Gohonzon and could start developing their life force strongly, the more unlikely the 3 calamities and 7 disasters will afflict this land. Because instead of being in a state of darkness and ignorance and delusion, their lives are becoming enlightened. So every problem in this way can be solved, and we can establish a great future as a result. Oddly enough, but it's not odd, Sensei's guidance for today, in the Daily Guidance Volume 2, I just read it before I did Morning Gongyo, and it's so apt to what we're saying. Perhaps you could read it, John.
No matter what bitter or painful thing may happen, bear up and overcome it through daimoku. As you do so, a life marked by the virtues of eternity, jo, happiness, raku, true self, ga, and purity, jo, will unfold. This is, moreover, the path of attaining Buddhahood in this lifetime.
Thank you. So, of course there will be natural disasters, always. Or rather, not natural disasters, but natural, potentially disastrous phenomena. Because there's Causton Mufu doesn't mean you won't have gales and storms. But people will have the wisdom to make preparation for it, to receive warning of it, and to make sure that nobody suffers. When the wisdom of humankind is properly working, it can work in rhythm with nature. In the gosho, Thus I Heard, which is in volume 3, Nichiren Daishonin said, a snake is no match for a dragon or an elephant, but it can foresee the coming of a flood 7 days in advance. So we too as human beings can develop the wisdom of the snake and foresee the coming of a flood 7 days in advance. Then no one will suffer. This is what he's meaning by making that, quoting that passage. So next time we move on to much more hard stuff, where Nichiren Daishonin really goes into the attack, and it becomes more and more fascinating. But in a way, just using that very short question for a whole lecture sort of brings us back, reorientates us, and gets us ready for what's to come. So Mr. Toda said, just to end with, intellectuals have said the RISSHO ANKOKU RON is a one-sided view. What nonsense! It explains the state of society and our world in relation to the universe and in the light of actual proof. So I think those are the best words to end with. Thanks very much for listening carefully. Thank you.